Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you taking this extra step to be prepared to hike on the AT in 2021. My name is Chloe DeCamera. I'm ATC's Trail Education Specialist. I'm based out of our Southern Regional Office in Asheville, North Carolina. I thru hiked the AT as a solo woman by myself in 2015 going northbound. And I'll let my co-presenters, we have Gina Knox and Catherine Herndon Powell on the line as well. So if you guys want to introduce yourselves real quick, we'll start with Catherine and then go to Gina.
Hey y'all, Catherine here. I work for ATC in our regional office in Roanoke, Virginia, and I thru hiked the trail back in 2006 with my best friend from high school. It was actually all her idea, but obviously it was a good idea.
Hi, my name is Gina Knox. I'm here as an individual contractor with the ATC, and I'm currently in Southeast Virginia. I had planned my AT thru hike for this year, but due to the coronavirus, I've decided to hang off. But back in 2018, when I moved to Virginia, I began taking large sections off the Appalachian Trail.
Thank you both. Now let's take a moment and talk about COVID-19. If you've been following ATC's communications at all this year, you know that we asked everyone to postpone their long distance hike. The pandemic is unfortunately still ongoing, so we have not changed our guidance. Hiking is a form of interstate travel, which makes it a public health risk. The safest thing for hikers and the communities they pass through would be for everyone to continue to put off their long distance hiking plans and stay local. We continue to monitor the situation in all 14 states and hope for good news, but until there's an effective, widely available vaccine or treatment for COVID-19, we will not be encouraging long distance hike or recognizing 2,000 milers or giving out hang tags at any of the visitor centers. So you might be wondering, why are we hosting this session with advice for long distance hikers? Well, as you can see, it appears that people are still going out on long hikes in 2021, and that folks who make that choice want to be ready in all ways that hikers have always been prepared, as well as taking extra precautions for this new paradigm. ATC is in a unique position to reach all those who are considering a long distance hike with information that we hope will minimize the risk and spread of COVID-19 outbreaks along the AT and in communities. ATC hosting these sessions does not mean that it is safe or advisable to thru hike in 2021. It means that we're determined to do the best we can to minimize the risk. Let's get started and review some basics. The Appalachian Trail this year is 2,193.1 miles. It goes from Springer Mountain in Georgia, the southern terminus, all the way up to Katahdin, not Mount Katahdin, just Katahdin in Maine. When I hiked it in 2015, it was 2,189.9. And it just goes to show the longer you wait, the longer the trail will be, because it grows inch by inch every year due to trail relocations. It covers 14 states, 6 national parks, 8 national forests, and we estimate approximately 3 to 4 million visitors every year. The AT is managed and protected through a cooperative management system. What is that, you might ask, and why are we talking about management of the AT on a hiking related call? And that's really just to give you a broader perspective of what goes on along the trail to make it a continuous footpath. So we have 87 distinct land managers. That could be U.S. Forest Service, National Park Service, state parks, etc. And those 31 local trail maintaining clubs up and down the trail. So if we look at this image on the right side of the screen, you'll see these different icons all represent a different local maintaining club. The line goes to their section, so the different colors represent their sections. So while you're hiking along the AT, you might see different rules, regulations, management decisions, or style of maintenance. And that's because of these different partners we have along the AT. The continuing partner is the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, who is my employer, Catherine's employer, and who Gina is contracting for right now. So we are the one partner up and down the trail, where you might be in Georgia, and our 2 other partners would be the Chattahoochee-Oconee National Forest and Georgia Appalachian Trail Club, or you could be in the Smokies with the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and the Smoky Mountain Hiking Club. So we are that consistent presence, but the ATC is not the one voice of the Appalachian Trail and how the decisions are made to protect and preserve it. And I would be remiss if I didn't give a special shout out to the 6,000 plus volunteers who contribute over 200,000 hours of work every year. So for those of you that don't know, we'll go ahead and talk about the different ways to hike on the AT. We did mention through hiking in the COVID statement. Through hiking means hiking the entire trail from Springer to Katahdin, or whichever way you choose, in 12 months or less. So you could go from June to June of one year and it would still be a through hike. It doesn't have to be an official calendar year. And then you could go northbound, or you could go southbound, or you could do a flip-flop or an alternative itinerary. I strongly encourage you to go to our YouTube page and check out that session from a few weeks ago, where our colleague Lori really went into depth on all the different options you have for a flip-flop hike. You could do a section hike. They by far have the coolest acronym. It's called a lasher, a long ass section hiker. Some people take decades. I know people that have taken 2 or 3 decades to complete their section hike, or people that have done it in those longer sections in two hiking years. And then we have day hikers, and that's the majority of people that are making up those 3 to 4 million numbers that I gave earlier. So you're waking up in your own bed, you're driving out to the trailhead, hiking all day, and then you're coming back to your car to go home at night. So now I really want to know about why you want to go out on the trail, and what do you imagine when you envision yourself out there? So if you could just take 30 seconds, we'll reflect in silence and think about what is your desired experience. So now let's talk about some numbers that we've seen on the trail. This is numbers on through hikers specifically, and we only started with 1990, but we have 1990 to 2019. The different colors represent through hikers starting in Georgia. So that's this orange color up here. And then we have green, those that have reported their hikes as completed to ATC down on the bottom. And in blue, we have southbounders. And in yellow, you can see that we just started in 2015 collecting data on flip-floppers. So I would love to see what you guys are noticing right off the bat. And if you wouldn't mind typing in the chat box what you think happened in 1999, why there was such a dip or maybe a steady incline around 2007 and 8, and anything else that you notice. So let's consider with our directions that we're thinking about going when we want to do a through hike or a long distance hike. The top 3 considerations should be terrain, crowds, and weather. So terrain specifically, this picture is from Katahdin, the most difficult climb of the entire AT. It's 5,000 feet elevation gain in 5 miles. And if you're going southbound, it is day 1. So there is a thing that people experience when they're hiking on the trail for a long time, and it's called trail legs. So a lot of northbound hikers have had their trail legs for 1,000 miles at this point. And it's a lot easier for northbounders to propel themselves up this mountain than it might be for a southbound hiker on day 1. But if you're looking for less crowding, which could be considered a con for northbound hikers, then I would consider looking at this picture that I took in 2016 or 17 in the Smokies, where you're required historically to stay inside the shelters. And I say historically because that's different this year with COVID. But usually everyone is funneling into these sites that they have to stay at. And then if it's rainy, like it was this day, you have a shelter capacity of 12, all of a sudden squeezing in 24 bodies on the 2 platform. And we actually have 4 people sleeping on the ground here. And then everyone's wet clothes just dangling. So it's almost like you're doing a do-si-do to try not to get someone's wet rain pants touching your face when you go outside for a bathroom break. And then weather is something that you should consider. I took both of these pictures. This one on the left is from Spence Field Shelter, which is about 4,000 feet in elevation. And the AT goes up to 6,700 feet on Kleeman's Dome. So imagine 2,000 feet plus elevation on that picture. And that's what spring in the Smokies can be like. And then I have experienced 3 Mays in a row where we got hit with a snowstorm that first week of May. And this picture, I think, is actually a little bit more dangerous weather conditions compared to this one, because you can see it's really wet snow. And a lot of people will be sending home their winter gear if they have a warm week in Georgia, and then they get to the Smokies, forgetting that we go all the way up to 6,000 feet. So take those into consideration when you're planning your your hike, and see if it actually meets your desired experience. And then leave no trace is a huge component of preparation when you're getting ready for your through hike. I recommend everyone to go to lnt.org and take the online awareness course, which will be about 15, 30 minutes of your time to really delve into deeper. A lot of people think that leave no trace is just pack it in, pack it out. But as you can see, there's 7 principles, and it's just going to help you be more prepared. And that's a little bit of what you're doing right now, is planning ahead and preparing by sitting on this session. And Catherine, if you wouldn't mind putting the awareness workshop or a link to that into the chat box, that would be great. Some big takeaways we want you guys to be prepared for are proper waste disposal. So please make sure that you're carrying a trowel when you're on your through hike, and digging your hole 6 to 8 inches deep, 200 feet away from the trail, the campsite, the water source especially. And then the only thing you should be putting in the cat hole is your human waste and toilet paper, baby wipes, tampons, etc. all need to be packed out. And then also making sure that you're properly storing your food, whether that's a bear canister, a hang, or an Ursack. You need to make sure that you are fully prepared to successfully use one of these storage systems, and that you've practiced it before you've gone out there. And now let's get to how many people are out there this year. If you have not already, please register your hike on atcamp.org. This is a very useful tool for hikers and ATC and managers of the trail. atc.org or atcamp.org only asks that you put in your start date, and it also allows you to see how many other people are starting their hikes along the trail at the same time. So maybe if you're reflecting back to your desired experience and you said solitude was one of the things you're looking for out there, maybe you don't want to start on March 1st where the number of people is nearing 50, and you don't want to camp with 50 strangers on your first night. This red line up here is our recommended capacity. So just take that into consideration as you're planning your hike and your starting location. Some pro tips: it works a lot better on a desktop, but it is iPhone and Android friendly. And all you have to do is put in your first night. It's not a reservation. So if you get to a campsite and it's full, AT Camp is not a reservation. It's just recommended, so we can see how many numbers are out there. It's also a really great way if there's a trail closure. ATC automatically has your email address, and we can shoot you a text or an email informing you of a closure or any important events going on along the trail. And safety. Just a quick disclaimer, this is coming from my perspective as a young white woman hiking alone on the trail. So my experience is by no means universal, but some tips would be: listen to your gut, report any incidents or concerning behavior to appalachiantrail.org/incidents. Please share your itinerary with those at home and check in regularly. Consider carrying a satellite communication device, like a spot device, so you can check in when you don't have cell service. Give your family the benefit of the doubt that you might not have service at every site. Firearms. I personally did not carry a firearm along the trail. And if you do, it's your responsibility to make sure that you are you have the correct permits. Consider that you're going through 14 states and 87 different land managers. So you need to be in abiding by the law for each of those states and land areas. And also you need to take responsibility for knowing where that firearms is at all times. And then stay on top of weather forecasts and hazards. When you're putting up a tent, especially make sure you're looking up for widowmakers, those dangling branch that a big gust of wind can knock off a tree. And then safety for COVID-19. Does everyone know what PPE stands for? Personal protective equipment. That used to be a very trail specific term, I feel like, and now everyone knows it because of COVID. the PPE, we're asking that you have a face covering, keep a spare in your first aid kit just in case you come across someone else exhibiting symptoms and you're providing them first aid. Your personal shelter is now also a part of your own PPE because we're recommending that no one sleeps inside shelters this year so they don't share airspace with others while they're sleeping. So this could be a tent, tarp, hammock, and then your trowel and hand washing kit. We're also encouraging people to not use privies this year. When you're resupplying in towns this year, please consider every point of contact, whether that's a shuttle into town, going into a local business. Please wear a mask when you're in town. Maintain that shared standard of safety and recognize that you are an ambassador for the trail and you're representing the entire hiking community with your behavior as you go into towns. And then I guess the last bit on that is maybe cut your trips to town a little bit shorter than you used to, or than you might have done in the past. Don't loiter outside of businesses as much. Regulations that you should be aware of. Dogs are not allowed in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park or Baxter State Park, where Katahdin lives up in Maine. The Great Smokies is on the Tennessee-North Carolina state line. Service animals are allowed. Emotional support animals are not service animals. Camping and fires have different regulations along the AT, so be prepared to be adaptable. And food storage, ATC recommends that all hikers carry a bear canister because those are the least prone to human error. We've had many reports of bear instances from people just poorly hanging a food bag or not using an Ursack right, not tying the right knot. If you want to learn more information about food storage, check out our last session that's on YouTube to go into more depth. The Smokies does require a permit. It is $20 for through hikers or $4 per person per day if you're a general backpacker. You can get those up to 30 days in advance. Some businesses have provided a printing station along the AT, like the Nantahala Outdoor Center. I'm not sure what that's going to look like this year during COVID. And Shenandoah and Baxter can get walk-up permits, and those are free. Register your hike at AT Camp, another plug there. And then the gear, I would love to go into detail here, but we have so much to talk about that I'm just going to say the big three. You want your backpack, your sleeping system, and your shelter. You could aim for roughly 3 pounds each. Obviously, that can get a lot lighter if you're going ultralight. Trowel and food storage system are crucial. Those are part of your PPE as well. If you want to save any money, consider looking into consignment shops for used gear or lightly loved gear, and then bear canisters, Ursacks, or bear hanging equipment. Sometimes you can rent bear canisters if you're just going out for a shorter period of time. Please don't forget your COVID-19 PPE with face coverings and hand sanitizer. And some pro tips, shoot for about 25% of your body weight with your pack weight with water and food. And ideally do a shakedown hike for at least 3 days and 2 nights, and bonus points if you go out in cold and rainy weather to see if your gear holds up. So I'm going to give you guys a break from hearing me talk and pass it over to Gina, who is going to talk to us about hiking while female now. So Gina, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Chloe, for that introduction. So now we're going to get into the meat of the presentation, hiking while female. I would first like to start by posing the question, what are some common questions that you've been asked while hiking? And if you'd like to type that into the chat, we'd love to see it. Yep, common questions, why are you doing it? Will you be safe alone? Aren't you scared doing it alone? That's a very common question. But are you really going alone? Are you taking a gun? Someone asked if you were going to be eaten by a bear. I've actually heard that question before. Yeah, assuming a male partner, father, is going to be worried about you. Excellent. So those common questions actually do come up very often, and some of those are the common questions that we have written down. Questions of sanitation, tampons, cups. Excellent. So as some people have addressed, some of these are very common questions that you will hear. Does your husband, boyfriend, parents, kids, etc. know that you're going out there? Do they worry about you when you're going out there, excuse me? Are you hiking by yourself? Do you have a gun? And have you read the book Wild? So with these common questions, I know that they came up a lot. I used to be a hiking lead for all women's group. And I would say that at least for me, the most common question that I've heard is, does your husband, boyfriend, parents know that you are going out?
Okay, and I'm going to jump in here for a couple slides just to share some of ATC's stats and pictures to start us off on a place of just affirming that you do belong on the trail, even if sometimes those questions that people ask, or when you just look around and find yourself to be the only woman camping at a campsite one night or something, you might not always feel like you do belong, especially if you're not really comfortable, but you do. And I want to highlight that that bottom bullet point there, that in 1980, the percentage of the female northbound hikers that were reporting their hikes to ATC was 12.5% of hikers. In 2019, we had, you can see we broke it down by flip-flop, northbound, southbound, and section hikers, but somewhere between 25 and 36% female hikers. Thought we would share those specific numbers because I think it's really interesting that we had a specific increase in female flip-flop hikers. As Chloe talked about in her intro, there's a lot of advantages to doing a flip-flop hike. Starting in Harper's Ferry or somewhere like that, you start out on easier terrain and with better weather and all of that. And we thought we'd also, just to continue in that theme of affirmation, show some historical pictures of that women have been hiking the trail for a good long time. Here's some photos from the 80s and the 90s. Gotta love the footwear and the big heavy packs and all the colors, you know. And those are great. These are actually all photos from our headquarters at Harper's Ferry. So this is a tradition that goes back pretty far, of hikers getting their picture made when they get to ATC headquarters, and it's the psychological halfway point of the trail. Those earlier pictures are actual Polaroids, and then we've switched over to digital photographs, of course. Here's some more photos that are a little bit more recent from the past few years. All right, back to you, Gina.
Thank you. So next I would like to talk about the mental prep through hiking the trail, not as a mental health professional, but as a hiker. So one of the most important things is honesty. Honesty, as with anything, is the most important. And especially when it comes to considering things like last year, when people had prepped for their Appalachian Trail hike and then were later asked to leave the trail, and the devastation that type of thing could leave with a person. So how would you feel if you didn't finish your through hike? Think out loud and articulate your expectations, honestly, about what it would be like if you went out on the trail and for any reason you wouldn't be able to finish, whether it be injury or anything else, and especially with COVID-19. And giving yourself space to reflect on your experiences, on those experiences should they come up unexpectedly. I myself have someone who I know who went out on the trail, who actually told me 3 years ago about the Appalachian Trail before I moved into Virginia. And she herself, when she went out for her first prep, was not able to finish her through hike. And I know that she was devastated. And again, we don't want to encourage anyone to think negatively about whether or not they'll be able to finish, but want to encourage that people stay honest with themselves about what that might be like or look like or feel like should you not be able to finish. And we do have a picture of Grandma Gatewood. I'm not sure how many people are familiar In a nice quote, it takes more head than heel. And I think that is what we're trying to express here. Catherine?
Yeah, so a little bit about packing. I don't know how many of y'all are familiar with the, the classic before and after photos you see for like weight loss programs and skincare regimens, but there's always that first photo where the person has terrible posture and they're not smiling. And, so here's one of my before pictures. Go ahead and there we go. This is from the Pacific Crest Trail. And you can see my backpack is just really riding really low. Go ahead and click again, Chloe. Here's another one that's a little more empowering from the PCT as well, with a really full pack of like 9 days of food, but it's still riding pretty poorly. I hiked the whole Pacific Crest Trail with that pack. And then if you'll click one more time, a few years later, I got this pack and it's just so much better. So that's a little anecdote I share. You can click a few more times, Chloe, and show some of the tips we have for packing. That it takes a long time for most folks to find the pack that fits them best. There are women-specific packs, and a lot of women do like those. They tend to have a narrower, the shoulders are a little bit narrower where the straps are, and the hip belt might fit a little differently. I know a lot of women who prefer the male or unisex pack just because, there's a lot of different types of packs out there and everybody's body is different. So my recommendation to find that Goldilocks fit would just be to try on as many packs as you possibly can. Most of the time, if you go into an outfitter store, they'll have some stuff you can throw in the pack to weigh it down with, 30, 35 pounds, even if that's not what you plan to carry on your hike, just to really feel what it feels like with a lot of weight in it and where those pressure points are, and can you adjust it to be really comfortable. But also even better if you can actually go backpacking with a pack before you commit to trying to do a through hike with it. And it's pretty hard sometimes to really get to try a lot of them out actually on the trail. Some outfitters have rental programs where you can rent a pack. And if you have any friends, we're going to give you guys a list of organizations at the end of this presentation where you might be able to find hiking partners that are women who might have their own gear that they would be willing to loan you for a weekend or something like that. Anything you can do to, try and feel out how a pack fits you. It's of course one of the most expensive items you're going to invest in, but it's also really important to get one that fits you well. And just in general, when you're packing, you want to have those heaviest items closest to your core. So I actually usually carry my water in a water bottle, but those packs that have the water bladder right next to your back is actually a pretty good system because water's heavy, and it's just going to be balanced better when you have that weight really close to your core. You can put bulky things that you're not going to need till the end of the day, like maybe your tent and your sleeping bag. Those go really well down in the bottom, so that you can have the densest, heaviest things really close to your core. And then last but not least, luxury items. Everybody's got them, what the things that are not necessarily essential to your survival, whether that's like a book or a journal or, all kinds of things. Actually, that would be a good question for the chat. Why don't you guys go ahead and tell us what your luxury items are? Just figuring out what's worth the wait. We're always trying to cut down on our weight, but don't be ashamed. I think everybody has at least one or two things that you carry that aren't totally essential, but maybe are good for your mental health.
Hello again. We would like to speak, I would like to speak a little bit about clothing options and considerations while you're going out on the trail. So to underwear or not to underwear, or to wear underwear. I think that everything pretty much here is going to come down to personal preference, but I want to give you a couple of considerations while prepping. Bras with underwires, no underwires, with sports bras and things like that it's something that should be heavily considered, especially when it comes to the wiring and how it can press against the body, how pieces of the wire may break uncomfortably. Skirts, when it comes to the heat, hiking in pants. I personally have always hiked in jeans, which I know for a lot of people are not preferable, but for me, I feel that it keeps out things like mosquitoes and takes away from things like chafing. That's not always going to be a preference for everyone, but when it comes to skirts and skirts, especially in the heat with mosquitoes, you may want to consider that it may be more breathable, but you may be eaten alive by mosquitoes, and especially if you don't are not the type to put on a lot of repellents. Same thing with the dresses. I have found that I've hiked in dresses before when it comes to open fields. Cold Mountain is a part of the Appalachian Trail that comes to mind, which may be lovely because the grass is low and you're out of the tree lines. But then when you get back in the tree lines, you'll have to reconsider that as well. Other considerations is how to dress and undress while on trail. When it comes to shelters, obviously that you may be sharing the space with other people, so you want to consider other people while doing that. Sometimes in shelters where you may have the privilege of being alone, but be considerate of covering yourself properly, perhaps in a sleeping bag or while in shelters or in areas that you'll be sharing with other people would be ideal. Otherwise, you can go deeper into the wood line and provide yourself more privacy when it comes to dressing and undressing, but then you'll have to take into those considerations again, bugs, ticks, mosquitoes, snakes, depending on where you're at. So always being careful of that. Another consideration would be frozen clothing. Again, I tend to hike in cloths and clothing that may not be most recommended, specifically cotton. And that material not only gets wet, it'll stay wet depending on the weather. And especially in the cold, I've had experiences where I would be wearing maybe a cotton sweater or either a thicker pair of jeans and sweat through them. And even though it's cold outside, and the clothing will freeze if it gets wet in that way. So that's something to consider. Chloe?
Yeah, I just want to give a special shout out for chafing because it's a reality of the trail and it can be super uncomfortable. Part of what she said up there, like underwear, yes or no, this was a really big topic of conversation for me and my buddy when we hiked on the trail, because she would chafe really, really bad if she did not wear underwear, and I would chafe really, really bad if I did wear underwear. So echoing Gina's statements of like every single person's clothing options are going to differ from person to person. So just work with what's best for you. But just to give you like a really prime example, I chafed all surrounding my armpit because I wore a polyester shirt, which wasn't like the highest quality. It was a Champion shirt. I loved it. It smelled atrocious towards the end, and some of the seams started rubbing the wrong way around my armpit. And nothing is more uncomfortable than walking 18 miles in a day and not being able to have your armpits touch your side. So I actually ended up putting my hiking poles underneath my armpits because the cool feel of metal just was like the one thing that made me feel sane. And then weight loss changes, all bodies change. I personally lost 10 pounds within the first 200 miles of my hike. And then I gained it all back within a week. And then I just stayed at the same weight the whole time. And I think that there is, Catherine was talking about this before and after pictures. And sometimes you'll see pictures of men after they're through hike and they look very emaciated and almost gaunt-like. And whereas women look like supermodels, they say, but I like to challenge that because I don't know many supermodels that have super muscular legs, emaciated clavicles and cheekbones, and then like a little sugar pouch of a belly from just all the garbage you're eating along the trail. I personally woke up every day and ate a Pop-Tart, followed by granola bars, followed by Scooby-Doo gummy snacks, followed by more sugary sweets, and then would have couscous and tuna every night. So I wasn't getting any vegetables while it was hiking on the trail until I went to town and would buy a bag of spinach and eat it while I was shopping. So it's just every single person's body is going to look differently. You might not come out of this hike with a six-pack, and if you don't, you're not doing it wrong. Everyone's going to come out looking differently. Most likely you'll have very muscular legs, but they'll probably be covered in scratches and bruises and mosquito bites, etc. So is there any else? I'm sorry if I forgot anything else that I was supposed to mention there, but that's just a little antidote that I like to share.
That's great. Thanks, Chloe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just, good to know going in. I know as women often, worry a lot about your weight. I don't think anybody goes on a long journey like through hiking the AT just to lose weight, but I've known women who were disappointed that they didn't lose more weight or they didn't like the bodily changes that they went through. So, just having reasonable expectations as you go in is a good idea. It can be frustrating, I think, to see men, if they go out with a big old beer gut or something, they might have an easier time losing that quickly early on in the hike. All right, so a little bit about hygiene. Yeah, we were wondering when we were going to get to it. So how do you pee and poop on the trail? We talked a little bit about digging a cat hole, and that's extra important this year because whether or not the privies are officially closed, as long as COVID-19 is among us and is a concern, we're definitely recommending you don't use the privies because they're just a place that's full of germs. So much safer to know how to dig a cat hole 6 to 8 inches deep, carry a trowel. It is not easy to dig a legitimate cat hole with your trekking pole or with the heel of your boot or tent stakes or all the things that people say they use sometimes. Often the ground is really rocky, tons of roots and stuff, and an actual trowel for that purpose is going to make it a much better experience, especially if you're doing it every day. So that's, of course, the same for men and women. But it's a little different when we're talking about peeing. So if you've not done a lot of peeing in the woods, you might be mostly used to using toilet paper every time you do it. And that's fine. If you want to carry toilet paper with you and use it when you pee, just make sure you're packing it out. So you want to also be prepared with like a Ziploc bag in your pocket or something like that, so you can keep putting that toilet paper in that Ziploc bag. It's not really leave no trace kosher to, tuck it under a rock or leave it out in the woods, even if it is biodegradable at some point. It's going to take a really long time to break down. And meanwhile, everybody's going to see it and think someone took a poop there because why else would there be toilet paper on the ground? So pack it out. Personally, I am a fan of the drip dry method. And I actually liked hiking in a skirt and without underwear so that I could just take a wide stance and go ahead and pee without even taking my pack off. That's a skill that I learned over many, many miles, and do a little shake, when you're drip drying. That's not for everybody. Again, this is, I think we keep saying it's personal choice, and a lot of trial and error goes into figuring out what works for you. A lot of women who do want to wipe, but don't want to deal with carrying extra toilet paper and having to pack out all that toilet paper will use a pee rag. There's something called a Kula cloth that's actually just designed for that purpose. But it could just be any kind of bandana. A lot of women will use a yellow bandana so that other people might know, hey, I'm not going to touch that bandana because that's probably her pee rag. And then you can actually hang it on the back of your pack. And because urine is sterile and it'll be exposed to, sunlight and air, it can dry while you're walking and be exposed to the sun and everything. And you, of course, wash it every chance you get when you get to town. But you just keep reusing the same cloth to wipe with. And then if you want to try to have the freedom of getting to pee standing up without, doing what I did, at least in the summertime, of wearing a skirt with no underwear. Pee funnels are designed for this. There's a bunch of them. Some of them have hilarious names like the Shiwi, the Go Girl, Whiz Freedom. I mean, these things are great. That's what all those images are. A bunch of different types of funnels that are just devices used to help you learn to pee standing up, so you don't have to pull your pants down or anything like that, and you don't have to take your pack off. I will say I haven't really used these very much myself, but I've heard that the thing to do is to definitely try it out for the first time in the shower. And it might take a little bit of trial and error to figure out how to use it. And then, of course, jumping into the menstrual cycle, how do you deal with having your period? So whatever you're used to using, if you're used to using tampons and pads, that's fine. But once again, you just got to pack it out and got to be prepared to pack it out. So some folks might like to have a Ziploc bag that's opaque, so you can't see what's in there. Or if rather than having to try and go find one of those in the store, you can always just cover a regular Ziploc bag in duct tape. And that way it makes it a little more durable and smell proof, as well as making it so that you can't see what's in there. Wipes, I really want to emphasize that Anything that doesn't go into a cat hole that does not naturally break down, such as a wipe or a tampon or a pad, should also not go into the privies. So the privies are, some privies are composting or moldering privies, but those systems are pretty delicate and they're really just designed to break down human waste and toilet paper. So nothing else should go into a privy or a cat hole. You've got to pack out all of those things. A lot of women do like to use the menstrual cups, such as the Diva cup. If you're using one of those, it's certainly convenient that you don't have to pack anything out. You do need to dispose of that blood in a cat hole. So again, you're going to dig a 6 to 8 inch cat hole and empty it in there and bury it. Since if you're not, also using it to go to the bathroom in, you might not need quite as big of a cat hole, but we still want to get it 6 to 8 inches down so that it's eliminating the chance that wildlife is going to dig it up or that anybody else can see it. And just a heads up that if you're doing a long distance hike, sometimes your periods might become less regular or less frequent, which I think is the case with any kind of athletic endeavor that your body's not used to doing. You hear about, I've always heard about like Olympic athletes that don't get their period for like years because of the intense training they're doing. So that does happen sometimes and can make it a little harder to predict. Talking a little bit about that last bullet point there of keeping up with self-care. One thing to think about is medications you might be on. You have to kind of think 6 months in advance. I'll share that I changed up my birth control plan when I did the Pacific Crest Trail. I thought it would be a good idea to switch over to birth control pills because then I could schedule out when I got my period, I could just keep taking the pills to keep my period from coming when it wasn't a convenient time. And that turned out to be a terrible idea because I made that switch right before the hike. And then that particular birth control pill made me kind of a crazy person emotionally. And I was all over the place. And I didn't even realize it until I was done with the hike and stopped taking it, that had been what was affecting me emotionally. So I think my takeaway from that I would share with y'all is just that whatever you're currently taking or whatever your current regimen is, probably if you're going to switch over for the hike, maybe do it a few months before so you can figure out what works well for you. Likewise with, under that category of self-care, if you feel more comfortable wearing makeup, doing anything in particular with your hair, shaving, wearing deodorant, it's okay to do all those things on the trail. You might meet a lot of other hikers who are not shaving or not wearing deodorant, but if you're more comfortable, that's okay. We just want to encourage you to do what feels right to you and don't feel like you're not allowed to wear makeup on the trail or anything like that. So I think I'm going to pass it back to Gina now.
So I'd like to speak a little bit about safety on the trail. Starting with situational awareness and hiking while solo. For me, I personally predominantly hike solo. And the one way that I take precautions is just making sure I'm looking around me at all times and trusting myself when it comes to people. If I feel like they're sketchy or persons are walking behind me, I might let them pass. When it comes to other precautions like sharing your location, I would say that goes hand in hand with posting on social media. I try to check my apps to make sure that my sharing locations are off. One app in particular would be Snapchat, where I will have, if you don't turn the location off on that app, for example, people can simply zoom in. They can take their finger and literally zoom into your GPS location and drop in on where you're at all times. So you may want to think of that when it comes to the apps that you have. When it comes to posting on social media, even though it's tempting to kind of put it on stories while you're doing your hike, you may want to consider putting a lengthy amount of time between each location before posting. Say, for example, if you are in one location, you may want to wait a week, maybe until you're far enough ahead of that location before sharing, so that, obviously people don't know exactly where you are at the exact time. Another safety precaution to consider is satellite communication devices. Always a great idea. Garmin comes to mind, so that should anything happen on the trail, should you be injured or lost or anything of that sort, you're able to use that satellite communication device to communicate where you are properly. Also, though, I will mention when it comes to satellite communication devices, the Garmin outage last year actually comes to mind as well. I think that there was either some ransomware or some type of takeover of the device where a lot of people who were out on trail in various locations reported that there was an outage, and you could see how that can pose problems as well. So maybe you want to consider not just having the one device, or either just or in addition to the satellite communication device, having a way where you'll be able to know where you are at all times. And then another consideration, something else to be considered, is that it would be better if you invite someone to hike with you versus someone choosing you to hike with. Again, that goes with trusting, especially if you're a solo hiker or plan on doing the hike by yourself. That goes with trusting yourselves, especially as a woman. I found along the trails that a lot of men who may see me as the damsel in distress or whatever have you, their ideas of wanting to help me with camp or being worried about me being by myself out there will invite themselves into my hike. And you may want to consider people who you think that you can trust instead of them considering you.
So here are some resources for all of you guys to consider. Wild East Women, we have a Facebook page and Instagram as well. That's a coalition between the Florida Trail Association, the ATC, and a lot of women affinity groups up and down the East Coast. Trail Dames, Girls Gotta Hike, those are stewardship or recreation-based programs where you can actually get out and hike with other women. And then there's a lot of podcasts. We highly recommend the Where We Walk series through She Explores podcast. That's all AT themed. The Trek, and then affinity groups like Unlikely Hikers, Outdoor Afro, Latino Outdoors, and Girl Trek are just great ways to find a common community and feel empowered to walk with a group of women. Okay, I haven't been able to see the chat box this entire time, but does anyone have any questions right off the bat? Any other hand washing tips specifically to clean hands before changing tampons, emptying cup? Yeah, that's great. I use a menstrual cup when I'm out there. So I always do it when I'm going to dig a cat hole. So I'm just doing all that process at once. So I'm gonna have my cat hole already dug. I'm squatting over a hole, and I'm either gonna spray my hands. Most of the time I just spray them really diligently with hand sanitizer. If I have my pocket knife, maybe before I went to the bathroom, I would clean under my nails, or if I had a nail file, I would clean under my nails so I can get all that grime. I would always keep my nails short while I was out there. And then you could take a baby wipe too if you have that out there, because you already have your trash bag set up next to your cat hole, hopefully. And then my hands are clean, and then I can take out my cup, remove my tampon, put it in the trash bag. The menstrual waste in your cup, you can just dump that into the cat hole. And then I clean my hands again, and then I put it back in, and then I clean my hands again. Any other questions? I've been learning to use a cup, but I'm concerned about getting my hands clean enough. Yeah, I get it. I love using a cup while I'm out there. Personally, I've had the same cup for about 7 years. So if you just do the math on that and how much money I haven't spent on tampons over the years, that's a huge sway for me. But I also, it's personal preference, and I don't want to pack out a lot of tampons when I'm out there. Any tips if you're sleeping in a shelter about how to be less disruptive in the middle of the night? Red lights. If you have a red light option on your headlamp, that is the best way to avoid blinding someone in the middle of the night. Also, if you get up a lot in the middle of the night, I would just maybe avoid the shelter in the first place and sleep in your tent. We're asking everyone to avoid shelters in general this year. So if you sleep in your tent, you're not going to be disturbing anyone else. But shelter etiquette is a real thing for once that's a viable option again and a safe option. So I would say red light. And I personally think that you are ill prepared if you don't have a pair of earbuds or to sleep with inside a shelter, because everyone gets up in the middle of the night. It's just the name of the game. Everyone snores. So if you don't sleep next to someone that's like, what do they call, like cutting logs or sawing logs every night, you are in for a rude awakening sleeping in shelters. But if you have earbuds that you can just put in, then that will be your saving grace. So I wouldn't feel too bad about it, but there is nothing worse than like being woken up at like 1 a.m. to a blinding light right here. Any other questions? Okay, well, for the sake of time, thank you guys all so much for joining us today. This is definitely my favorite session yet. And if you have any questions, we plugged our emails into the chat box. Thank you guys. Have a wonderful day.